The rain came down hard. It was like the sky was crying. Lawrence sat in his wheelchair on the side of the street, watching people rush by. Cars honked, water splashed everywhere, and everyone seemed to be in a hurry. But Lawrence didn't move. He couldn't. His body was stuck in that wheelchair after the accident, and it felt like his life had been stuck ever since. It had been months since his mother and twin sister died. Since then, Lawrence had hardly said a word. He didn't laugh or smile. He just stayed quiet, alone in his thoughts. The accident had taken everything from him: his family, his happiness, his hope. He didn't expect anyone to notice him. No one ever did. Everyone was too busy with their own lives. But today was different. A soft voice called out to him, "Do you want to cross the road?" Lawrence looked up, confused. A girl was standing in front of him. She looked young. Her clothes were old and torn, and her hair was messy. But what really caught his attention was her eyes. They were kind, like she really cared. Lawrence didn't say anything. He just looked at her. But the girl didn't wait for him to answer. She bent down and said, "I'll help you." She pushed his wheelchair without asking, without hesitation. Lawrence didn't stop her. He didn't even try to. It felt like she was doing something important, something he couldn't do for himself. The girl pushed him through the rain, moving slowly but surely. Cars kept passing, but no one stopped. People ignored them like they always did. But she didn't rush. She didn't care about the cars. She just focused on getting him safely across the street. When they finally reached the other side, Lawrence looked up at her. For the first time in a long while, he felt something. It was a small feeling, like a tiny spark inside him. He didn't know what to say, but he managed to say, "Thank you." "My name is Christina," she said, smiling. "Lawrence," he whispered. Just then, a black SUV pulled up, and the door slammed open. Mr. Anthony, Lawrence's father, ran out, his face filled with worry and anger. "Lawrence!" Mr. Anthony shouted, rushing toward them. Lawrence's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't seen his father like this in months. He didn't know what to feel. Fear? Relief? Maybe both. Christina stepped back quietly. She knew this wasn't her place. She was just a stranger, a homeless girl, and Lawrence was a rich man's son. She had helped him, but she didn't belong here. Mr. Anthony knelt down beside his son, his voice shaking with fear. "Lawrence, why did you leave the house? Do you know what you've done to me?" he asked, his voice filled with emotion. Lawrence didn't answer. He couldn't. He just stared ahead, feeling like everything was moving too fast, too loud. His father's voice, the girl's kindness, everything felt like a blur. Mr. Anthony didn't wait for an answer. He lifted Lawrence into the car, his hands shaking. "Let's go," he said quietly. The door slammed, and the SUV sped off, leaving Christina standing in the street, alone again, watching them leave. What did Christina's simple act of kindness really mean to Lawrence? Would Mr. Anthony ever realize the gift she gave his son? Would Lawrence ever break out of the silence that held him? The days after that moment on the street felt like a blur. Lawrence was back in his wheelchair, sitting quietly by the window, as he had been before. His father, Mr. Anthony, tried his best to act normal, but his mind was constantly racing. He couldn't shake the image of his son, sitting in that chair on the edge of the street, looking lost and scared. It haunted him. And then, there was Christina, the girl who had helped Lawrence when no one else cared. Mr. Anthony couldn't stop thinking about her. He couldn't understand it. Why did his son respond to her and not to him? He had given Lawrence everything. And yet, it was this homeless girl who had brought a spark of life back into his son's eyes. Mr. Anthony spent his days working from home, still trying to manage his business, but his thoughts were always on Lawrence. He couldn't bear the silence that filled the house. The silence was all around him, his son's silence, the empty rooms, the loneliness that seemed to echo through the halls. He didn't know how to fix it. How could he? One morning, Mr. Anthony made up his mind. He had to find the girl. He had to thank her, to understand why she had done what no one else could do. He picked up the phone and called his personal assistant. "I want you to find a girl named Christina," he said firmly. "She used to stand by the gate of our old house. She helped Lawrence cross the street the other day." The assistant was silent for a moment, then replied, "Yes, sir. I will find her right away." Mr. Anthony hung up the phone and sat in his chair, his mind already working through all the possibilities. What if he could bring her into his world? What if she could somehow help Lawrence? But deep down, he knew it wasn't just about Lawrence anymore. There was something about Christina, her kindness, her warmth, her strength, that made him feel like he had found a missing piece of himself. Meanwhile, Christina was back in the city, struggling to stay warm in the cold rain. She had no home, no family, and barely any food. But she was used to it. Life had been hard for as long as she could remember. She had learned to survive on the streets, asking for help when she needed it, doing what she could to get by. That day, she had found shelter under a tree, trying to stay dry. The rain fell in sheets, drenching her clothes and making her shiver. Her stomach was empty, and her heart was heavy. She hadn't seen Lawrence since the day she helped him cross the road, but she couldn't forget his sad eyes, his brokenness. She wondered if he was okay. Just as she was starting to give up hope, a couple drove by in their car. They spotted her standing by the wall, drenched and shaking. Without hesitation, they pulled over. "Oh my God, this girl is freezing," the woman said, her voice filled with concern. The man quickly got out of the car. "We need to help her," he said. "Let's take her to the hospital." Christina didn't have the strength to argue. She was too tired, too cold. They helped her into the car and rushed her to the nearest hospital. The nurses immediately took action when they saw how bad she looked. Her body temperature was dangerously low. She had hypothermia. She was admitted to the ward for treatment, but Christina was too weak to understand what was happening. Back at Mr. Anthony's house, his personal assistant had been searching for days. He had gone to the old house, asking around, but no one had seen Christina since that day. He had even gone to the street where she had helped Lawrence, but no one could tell him where she had gone. Frustrated, Mr. Anthony's assistant finally called him with the news. "Sir, we've searched everywhere. We can't find her. She's gone." Mr. Anthony's heart sank. He had been so close, so sure he would find her. He looked at Lawrence, sitting in his wheelchair, staring blankly at the floor. The silence in the house was deafening. Mr. Anthony closed his eyes and whispered, "I can't lose this. I can't lose what she gave him." But he didn't know where to find her. Little did he know, Christina was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. She had no idea that someone was searching for her, someone who wanted to thank her for what she had done. 2 days passed, and Mr. Anthony tried to keep his emotions in check. He kept telling himself that it didn't matter, that he would find a way to help Lawrence without her. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. He had seen the change in his son, and it was because of her. Then, one morning, the phone rang again. It was the doctor. "Mr. Anthony," the doctor said softly, "Christina is awake now. She's stable." Mr. Anthony jumped to his feet. "Thank you, doctor. I'm on my way." He didn't waste any time. He told Agnes to watch over Lawrence and rushed to the hospital. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he drove. He didn't know what he would say to Christina, but he knew he had to see her. When he arrived, the doctor met him and led him to Christina's room. She was sitting up in bed, looking weak but awake. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Hello, Christina," Mr. Anthony said softly, sitting beside her. "I'm glad you're awake." Christina was shocked. "I didn't expect to see you here," she whispered. "I need to thank you," Mr. Anthony said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've done something for my son that no one else could. You've given him hope when I couldn't." Christina didn't know what to say. She had never been thanked like this before. She had always been invisible, a ghost in the world. But now, here was a man, a billionaire, thanking her for something so simple, something that had felt so natural. What would Christina say to Mr. Anthony? Would she understand just how much she had changed Lawrence's life? And would she ever let herself believe she was truly part of their world? The days that followed Christina's decision to move into the mansion felt like a whirlwind. When she first walked through the grand doors, it all seemed so unreal. The house was massive, the rooms spacious and filled with expensive furniture, but it wasn't the size that caught her attention. It was the warmth. For the first time in what felt like forever, Christina didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged, at least for now. Lawrence, on the other hand, was still distant. His silence hadn't completely lifted, but there was a shift in him. He seemed less withdrawn, less trapped in the bubble of his grief. He hadn't spoken much to Christina yet, but every time he saw her, his eyes softened. It was subtle, but Christina noticed. Christina stayed in a small guest room, the kind of room she had only ever seen in movies. At first, she couldn't believe it was hers. But every time she tried to pinch herself, the softness of the blankets and the warm food in her belly reminded her it was real. Still, she couldn't help but feel out of place. She wasn't used to the comfort, the kindness, the stability. And it wasn't just the house that felt different, it was the people. Mr. Anthony was a man of few words, but he had a quiet strength. He kept his distance at times, but when he looked at her, it was always with care. He hadn't pushed her to open up. He hadn't asked her to explain everything about her past. He simply offered her the chance to heal, the chance to have a family. Every morning, Christina would meet Lawrence in the garden, where they would sit quietly. Sometimes she would tell him stories, and sometimes they would just sit together in silence. She could see the pain still inside him, the way his eyes drifted, like he was somewhere far away, but she didn't push him. She understood what it was like to carry pain you couldn't speak about. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden under a big tree, Christina took a deep breath and spoke. "Lawrence, I know it's hard, but you don't have to carry all of this alone." Lawrence looked at her, his face unreadable. He didn't respond, but there was a flicker in his eyes, something that told Christina he was listening. Mr. Anthony had always kept a watchful eye on them, making sure that both of them were adjusting. He had brought in a therapist to help Lawrence with his healing, and he had made sure Christina had everything she needed to feel at home. But there was still one thing that was missing: a connection. The spark that had been ignited between Lawrence and Christina on that rainy day seemed to have faded since she moved in. She wasn't sure how to bring it back, but she knew she had to try. For Lawrence's sake, and for hers. One day, after a quiet morning together, Mr. Anthony called Christina into his office. She had gotten used to the mansion by now, but this room was different. The walls were lined with books, and there was an expensive leather chair behind the desk. Mr. Anthony stood by the window, looking out into the garden. "Christina," he began, his voice steady, "you've done something for my son that I could never have done. But I want you to know that it's not just about helping him. It's about all of us. You're part of this family now, and I need you to know that you don't have to hold back. Whatever you need, whatever you're feeling, we're here for you." Christina felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She had never had someone offer her this kind of care, this kind of security. She didn't know how to take it. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I'm just so thankful. I never thought I'd find people like you." Mr. Anthony smiled softly, his eyes warm. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you have a place here. Don't be afraid to reach out. We're a family now." As he spoke, Christina felt something inside her shift. She had been so used to surviving, to keeping her distance, but now she was being asked to be part of something more. She had spent so many years alone, but now she didn't have to be. She had a family, even if it didn't look like the one she had imagined. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Christina and Lawrence sat outside, just like they had every day. But tonight felt different. The air was warmer, and the night didn't feel as heavy. There was something in the way Lawrence looked at her now, a hint of curiosity, maybe even a spark of hope. Christina spoke again, her voice soft but full of conviction. "You're not alone anymore, Lawrence. You never have to be alone again." Lawrence looked at her for a long time. Then slowly, hesitantly, he nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Could this new beginning really be the fresh start Lawrence needed? Would Christina's presence truly help him heal, or was the past still too heavy to leave behind? And what role would Mr. Anthony play in the healing process? Would he finally break through the walls that had built up around his son? The days grew longer, and with each passing day, the silence in the mansion became a little less heavy. Lawrence, though still quiet, was slowly starting to find his way again. His wheelchair was no longer his only world. He would spend hours in the garden, sometimes alone, sometimes with Christina by his side. The connection between them was subtle but real, no words needed. It was enough to sit together, to exist in the same space without the weight of expectations or forced conversation. Christina continued to be his anchor, the person who brought him back to the present. She didn't rush him. She didn't try to fix him. She simply let him be. And for Lawrence, that was more than he had ever hoped for. He hadn't known that being seen, truly seen, could heal him. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, the sun casting soft rays through the leaves, Lawrence turned to Christina, his voice quieter than usual. "Do you ever think about what your life could be if things were different?" he asked, his eyes focused on the ground. Christina blinked, surprised by the question. She hadn't expected him to ask. She thought, for a moment, about her life before all of this. The streets, the hunger, the cold. She thought about the orphanage, about the people who never cared. "I don't know," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I think about it sometimes, but I don't let it change what I have now." She turned to him, her eyes steady. I'm here. This is where I am now. And I'm trying to make the best of it. Lawrence didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, fingers still weak, but moving more freely than before. It was slow progress, but it was progress. And in a way, that felt like a small victory. You're right, he said after a while. I think I've been stuck for so long in the past. I've been holding on to all the things I've lost. He glanced up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. But maybe it's time to let go. Christina smiled softly. It's not easy, Lawrence. But it's worth it. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means allowing yourself to live again, to find new things to hold on to. Lawrence nodded, but his mind was racing. It felt like something had shifted inside him, something that had been buried for so long. He had been so angry for so long, angry at the world, at his father, at himself. But now, as he sat beside Christina, he realized that the anger was only keeping him stuck. It wasn't helping him heal. A small part of him, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was something else, was beginning to believe that there was more to his life than the accident, more than the tragedy. There was still time for something else, something better. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner with Mr. Anthony, who had been unusually silent, Lawrence felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't a grand realization, but something had changed. He had taken another step forward. A small one, but it was progress. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew there were still a lot of things he needed to face, things he wasn't ready to talk about. But for the first time in months, he felt like he wasn't walking this road alone. That night, as he lay in bed, his mind wandered to Christina's words. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means allowing yourself to live again. He repeated the phrase in his head, like a mantra. Maybe he could do that. Maybe he could start to heal. Would Lawrence finally take the next step in his healing journey? And how would Christina's presence continue to shape his future? Was he ready to face the pain of his past, or was he still too afraid?